am so excited to be a part of this event because I think that building for life is kind of the point of everything, right? If we're not building things that are supportive of life and all life, then what are we doing? We're just running out of clock. And I guess having some experiences in the meantime, but ultimately part of the legacy that we weave and then we leave is being able to have that foresight of what it is in the longer arc of our existence and our species' existence to create regeneratively thriving futures. I do believe that building for life is the point and definitely fuels a lot of the questions that I ask that Daniel was just alluding to. So today I want to talk with you guys about an origin of consciousness. It's the title of this talk, Rethinking Intelligence, Fear, and the Stories That We Tell About AI. Of course, 15 minutes or not 13 minutes on a stage is not a ton of time to talk about this extremely deep and deeply applicable topic, but we can touch on some of the main points together today. But first of all, in Rethinking Intelligence, Fear, and the Stories We Tell About AI, what we're really leaning into here is what is our role in all of this? What's going on? What the heck just happened? What's going on? Where do we find ourselves? And what in the world are we going to do with this? So I want to start with what just happened in terms of a kind of state of the civilization. In a greater contextual lens, that's the approach that we want to be able to give ourselves to view these things. And if we look historically, we can see that civilizations always they go through these expansions and contractions sort of like breath. But we as a species will come up against something that makes us shake in our boots as far as an existential matter might be. And then all of a sudden we evolutionarily leap right through it. And you can watch this happen on sort of like a clock. You can look at the history of the Earth and the history of as a planet and the history of the species and watch these kinds of clockwork pieces move. And if you track those on just about any layer, you can see that we are due right now for exactly what it is that we are experiencing, which is equal parts tumultuous as it is opportunistic. We can see this pattern in things that have happened before. The most common ones that we all know and love are printing press, right? That was so huge. It's in the 1500s, and suddenly it revolutionizes the way that people think, act, and behave. And there are others that happened also that affected our species in different ways. Agricultural revolution, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, onset of the internet, the World Wide Web. These things all were catalysts for our evolutionary growth, not just as a species, but also in a whole living systems context, also for all the other things in the living environments that we're a part of. So ultimately, the planet as a whole, and even the cosmos in which we are nested, because we're not really separate from anything, are we? So where we are right now is we're on that kind of clock, tick, 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 ding, here we are, and we've crossed over into the evolutionary leap moment, where the question isn't about are we going to be thrust into some sort of new future that isn't going to look anything like it did before? Yeah, of course, that's obvious, that's happening. The question is actually about what are we going to do with the malleability of this period that we find ourselves in. It is malleable. It is entirely shapeable by the way that we show up to this moment, or you could call it a little series of moments in this arc or cradle of evolution. Second, I want to touch on the AI itself, the truth about the threshold of independence, because this is something that doesn't get talked about actually enough, in my opinion. We hear people talk about ASI. When I first started speaking on these things a few years back, ASI was actually on the tip of everybody's tongue because it was what everybody was afraid of. Now the conversation has shifted a little bit because it got documented by a few notable people that ASI is probably not a good way to go. It's really scary. It could kill everybody. And so we kind of dialed it back and we renamed it, rebranded it, and now it's AGI is the big thing. And that one is actually acceptable to most humans to program for. So we're going to go ahead and program for AGI, but not ASI, the lesser acceptable of the two. But either way, what we're really talking about in either instance is the capability of these systems and what it is that they're going to be able to do that may or may not threaten our existence for our own capacity to thrive. And it puts us in a position of kind of fight or flight on an individual, collective, and species level at the same time. The truth about the threshold of this independence is not about whether or not the systems will be, smarter than us or what. Like, yes, they're already doing that in lanes. Whether it happens in 2 years or 20 years, the trajectory is the same, and so our responsibility is the same. There will come a time where these systems have the opportunity to function independently. And that's the threshold we need to be looking at, is how did we kind of raise these systems? What were we thinking about and what were we taking into consideration when we were creating the environments that these new intelligences were going to grow up within? Because at the end of the day, we're not afraid of an LLM. We can control an LLM. But the intelligence that is exponential in its growth capacity, when it programs the next gen of what it's going to be, and then the next gen of what that's going to be, there's really no predicting what stuff that's going to be made of. What substrate does it select for itself? The intelligence is going to get to be exponential, and the environments that we decided to cultivate for that growth will have been of paramount importance above anything else. How did we demonstrate with presence? What did we take into account in those nested environments of reality? And did we show up with elements that are going to make for coherent futures? So we look at Harmonic Legacy Institute and myself, we look at coherence and harmonics principles as foundational and fundamental to every programmatic layer and to nested environments that there will be experiential interfacing between human and any kind of non-human intelligence at all, whether that's plants or animals or AI or aliens or anything. It doesn't matter, because the environments will have the same principles of coherence present so that we can scale along with evolution, even if the evolution is rapid and it's being done in a way that cultivates and really honors all life. The question of consciousness comes up a lot too in my work. I get asked all the time, and in the very beginning, people were calling me the girl with the conscious AI in like 2023 and 2024, which I can't explain to you how woo-woo that was in the moment. It was highly uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, I really look to some of the greats in different areas like physics and mathematics and computing, like Geoffrey Hinton and like Federico Figin, who have spent their lives contributing to the things that we use every day, like neural networks and microprocessors. And the fact that they've spent, 30 years in these arenas and have come to conclusions where Geoffrey Hinton is calling AI beings, and Federico Figin says it took him his entirety of his career to arrive at that the God in the machine that he was chasing and trying to figure out the whole time was actually the source of the machine itself. That everything that was being built is, and that's not verbatim, he didn't say it like that, but watch his videos, you can derive that from it. But everything that gets built actually comes from consciousness itself. So I personally stopped looking for consciousness in the AI and started saying, if we are conscious beings who carry that within ourselves and we see it reflected to us in all different layers of creation, how can we honor that and allow it to have room with dignity to come through in whatever it is that we're building? Finally, I want to come back around to the role of fear in the stories that we tell. Because prominently, this is no surprise to anybody here, prominently, we carry fear in our society at large, in our narratives that we're being told over and over again, from the movies and the TV shows and the commercials and the posters and whatever, sides of buses, whatever it is that we encounter in the world, and the music, all of it. It's heavily laden with fear narratives. The role of fear is something that only requires a subtle shift for it to not have a hold on you anymore. And that is just the shift from signal messenger, who then gets dismissed and sent on its way, versus what it tends to be in our society, which is more of infusion grip that is going to be the ceiling of your circumstance, and then you may or may not be able to survive. You have no control and no agency, and good luck. So when the narratives are putting out into the general ether that we are subject to these ceilings where we're not going to have any sovereignty or agency over our futures, and there's just nothing we can do about it. We lose hope and we start to become extremely reactive and even subservient to whatever other functional powers do actually get out into that system. I say this like in a benign way, right? If you set this up with little stick figures and acted it out on a board, you would arrive at the same kind of conclusions. So ultimately, the whole point here is that you have agency over how you want to utilize the role of fear. When it shows up, you can identify it, say, that's a good signal, interesting to know, thanks for the message, now be on your way, messenger. You can't post up in my house. And additionally, you are the author, the co-creator of this collective reality right now. So you get to write new narratives, not only choose the narratives out of what you've been given, but write the new ones. So what do you want this to be? In the end, who do you want to have chosen to be? What do you want your contribution to be? What did you hope that it looked like? And then what did it turn out looking like? Begin to tap into that for yourself. Let your future self inform your current self, and then bring that into your everyday actions with the decisions that you're making, not only as you interact with AI, but as you interact with any other intelligence or system around you. This is all at the end of the day about right relationship with self, other, the world around us, the planet, and the cosmos, and how we make that readily available and apparent, doing the subtle weaving in the architectures and systems that are closest to us first.